Nia DaCosta in the Bone Temple won me over after not really vibing with 28 Years Later, even as a fan of the original movies. Honestly, Nia was the main reason I wanted to see it in theaters instead of waiting until it was released at home. And I'm really glad I did because even a week later, there are so many scenes that are still sticking with me, and I really want to talk about them, so let's do it. Obviously, I can't talk about these without spoilers, so if you haven't seen it yet, favorite this for later and come back and let me know what you thought was the most shocking scene. Kicking things off with our trio in the woods, Kathy, Tom, and Jono. Jono decides to go off and try and kill one of the infected, which immediately signals for more and escalates into this crazy showdown between Jono and the infected, while Kathy and Tom leave him there stranded. It's a really emotional scene. We barely know these characters, but I think they got across pretty well how they are connected, and it makes you kind of sad to see Jono facing these creatures alone. As he's taking on this big group of infected, he slices one of them and blood gets into his system, immediately turning him into an infected. This felt really reminiscent of Frank's death in 28 Days Later when he's messing around with the crow and the blood drops in his eye. I also like how there's a callback to this later when Jimmy Ink, aka Kelly, is leaving the farm and crosses paths with the infected Jono, and she immediately kills him and ducks, showing that she's a lot more seasoned of a fighter than Jono was and capable of taking them on without getting infected. Erin Kellyman is also just fantastic as Kelly, so I love all the scenes that we get with her and the complexity of her character. Another complex character we get to see a lot more of this time is Samson. I wasn't loving his storyline in 28 Years Later, but this time we get a lot more about him. As soon as I saw the sequence in the Bone Temple when he first faces off with Dr. Kelson, I was immediately sold. It is super tense and the cinematography is gorgeous. I just love how drawn out it is, and you really think that it could go either way until we finally get to the resolution. Overall, it was just a fantastic introduction to how they were going to explore their companionship. And in general, Samson's story is a lot more interesting to me. We get to see his humanity as an infected, but also before everything broke out. And I did think that the cure storyline was really interesting, especially when we do see the effects of the medication later. And on the flip side, we see the lack of humanity at the farm when Sir Jimmy Crystal and his fingers invite themselves in for a meal. There's that immediate tension with Tom and Kathy returning, but also with things like Jemima doing that absurd Teletubby dance, which really sets the scene for what to expect in the barn when all hell breaks loose. We see them doing their acts of so-called charity, but then when Tom picks Jemima as who he wants to fight to take the place of and survive, that flip switches, and Emma Laird was fantastic in the role, really taking on the different levels of the character, which is why when that hook comes flying after Kathy realizes she can try to help Tom, it's kind of unexpected and more shocking. You kind of feel for her in a weird way, even though she is the antagonist in the situation. And then everything's on fire, and Spike is headed after Kathy and changes his mind and asks her to save him, essentially, to go with her. And she denies him, which I wasn't totally expecting. I thought that maybe a little bit of humanity would show through there, and it didn't. But it does make sense because obviously Spike is with the group that killed all of her loved ones. And someone who did look like they wanted to help Spike is Jim. And I honestly gasped when I saw Cillian Murphy on screen. I wasn't expecting it at all. Maybe I should have been, but I wasn't. What was even cooler is that he's still in the same cabin from 28 Days Later, now with his daughter Sam. We don't see Selena or Hannah, so I'm really curious to see why that is. I think it was an excellent setup for the next part as we see Spike and Kelly climbing over a wall, I think it was. So I'm really excited to see what happens in part 3. And could anything else be number one other than Dr. Kelson's Iron Maiden performance? I mean, Ralph Fiennes is fantastic throughout this entire film, but especially in this sequence. He really captures the absurdity of having to pretend to be Satan for a bunch of cultists. The theatrics behind it are just top notch. I love all the fire and just the energy. It's exactly what I would expect from a post-apocalyptic concert. Plus the way he turns the tables on Sir Jimmy Crystal by putting him upside down on the cross, and then all the hallucinations that we get from Jack O'Connell's character, who he did fantastic as well. I love seeing him interact with Dr. Kelson, both in this sequence, but also when they first meet within the Bone Temple. Overall, it was just fantastic, and I loved it. What scene in the Bone Temple stuck with you the most? Let me know in the comments.